Hello and welcome to Psychology School. I hope you all are safe and fine. So today we will discuss about some other topics of chapter 2, self and personality. And so far we have discussed about type and trait approaches and psychodynamic approach of Freud. Now if you have to revise these approaches, you can watch the previous video classes. And now in this video class, we will discuss about some other approaches of personality. But before starting the topic, let's have a look to the correct answers of the questions of previous video class. So here are the answers. The three levels of consciousness are conscious, pre-conscious and unconscious. The second answer, the three elements of personality are id, ego and superego. The third answer is projection. Fourth answer is rationalization. Fifth is projection. Sixth answer is phallic stage and seventh is 2 to 3 years of age. The eighth answer is ego, which works on the reality principle. Ninth is it, and the last answer is unconscious is a reservoir of repressed needs, impulses, ideas, wishes or instincts. Now moving on to the topic, the post-Freudian approaches of personality. Now many theorists further developed their ideas after following Sigmund Freud. So some theorists worked with him as followers, but later on they broke up with him and developed their own theories. So among them are Carl Jung, Alfred Adler, as well as later theorists such as Karen Horney, Erich Fromm and Erik Erikson. So these theorists have been called as neo-analytic or post-Freudian in order to differentiate their work from Freud. So these theories give importance to motivational processes other than sexuality, and emphasis is on mainly human qualities of creativity, competence and problem solving. So let's start with these theories one by one. And among post-Freudians, the most famous was Carl Jung. So Carl Jung was one of the most dedicated followers of Freud. But later on, he broke away from Freud and he developed his own theory of personality called analytical psychology. So Jung's theory is different from Freud's theory because of two major reasons. So firstly, Jung placed much more emphasis on people's future-oriented goals, hopes and plans, and less emphasis on sexual and aggressive impulses which arise from past conflicts. And secondly, he also had a different view regarding the nature of the unconscious. So in addition to the personal unconscious described by Freud, Jung focused on the collective unconscious, which is a part of the mind that is common to all humans. Now, Jung believed that human beings are guided much by aims and aspirations and not by sexual drive and aggression, and focused on the collective unconscious, which consists of archetypes. So these archetypes or primordial images are inherited from our ancestors, and archetypes include the mother, earth, the father, the son, the hero, God and death. So according to Jung, these archetypes are found in dreams, myths and other cultural products. Now according to him, self strives for unity and wholeness, and for achieving it, a person must involve in the process of harmonizing one's personal and collective unconscious. Now let's discuss about the next post-Freudian approach, that is of Karen Horney. Now Karen Horney was one of the first women among psychoanalysts, and Horney believed in the basic foundations of Freud principles, but she also disagreed on some parts as well. So Horney believed that each individual has the potential for self-actualization and gave emphasis on human growth. So her major contribution was in the field of feminine psychology, and her views on females' sex differences are different from Freud. Now according to her, there are similarities between the two sexes, and no one can be viewed as superior or inferior. So women are affected by social and cultural factors rather than by biological factors. So Horney argued that any psychological problem is due to disturbed interpersonal relationships. Now, interpersonal relationships means that the relations between two or more persons. So here it means the relationship of a child with parents. Now, a child feels insecure and develops feeling of basic anxiety due to the parents' indifferent attitude, discouraging and erratic behavior. So due to the lack of respect for the child's needs and lack of real guidance, a child feels insecure. And too much or too little responsibility of parents, their overprotection, discrimination, hostile nature and so on, these are the main cause of basic anxiety. Now children learn that they are weak and powerless. So they are dependent on their parents for safety and satisfaction. Now according to Horney, basic anxiety leads to the development of basic hostility, a feeling of resentment or hostile feeling towards parents. And because the hostility can't be expressed directly to parents, it is repressed, which only increases the child's anxiety and interfere their healthy development. Now moving on to the next approach, that is of Alfred Adler. Alfred Adler was a colleague of Freud and Jung, and he broke up with Freud over the issue of sexuality and proceed to develop a new theory which is known as individual psychology. Now according to Adler, human beings are social beings and their behavior is purposeful and goal directed. So they relate themselves to other people and engage in cooperative social activities. Personal goals are the sources of our motivation. Now each person has the capacity to choose and create. So he also emphasized the uniqueness of personality. Each person has his or her own traits, interests, values and a distinctive style of life. So each individual creates his or her own personal approach to living. Now Adler also believed that each individual develops feelings of inadequacy and guilt or inferiorities which arise from childhood, and each individual tries to overcome these feelings of inferiority. So these concepts given by Adler together make his theory of individual psychology. Now moving on to the next approach, that is of Erich Fromm. Now he developed his theory from social orientation. He also viewed human beings as social beings which could be understood in terms of relationship with others. Society is created by humans in order to fulfill this essential nature. The important thing in his theory of personality was that a person feels lonely and isolated if he or she has become separated from nature and from other people. So it can take two forms. Firstly, that the person can't tolerate lack of power and loneliness and so on. And so a person escapes from freedom because he feels alone, fearful and confused. And secondly, the person tries to improve it to a sense of full independence, so self-realization and self-identification, thus developing the desire for freedom. Now according to Fromm, freedom was central to human nature, and Fromm proposed that our personality or our character traits. So Fromm proposed that our personality developed from our experiences with other individuals. So character is developed through experiences at home, from school and from society. So the main thesis was that character or personality affects and is affected by social structure and social change. So his work also recognizes the value of positive qualities of human beings such as tenderness and love in personality development. Now moving on to the next theory, that is of Erik Erikson. Now Erikson considered himself as a Freudian psychoanalyst. So he proposed a psychosocial theory of development which suggests that an individual's personality develops throughout the lifespan. And this view was different from that of Freud's view that personality is fixed in early life. Now, he emphasized that social relationships are important at each stage of personality development. In his psychosocial developmental stages, the adolescent period is particularly emphasized, and because of the transition between childhood and adulthood. During adolescence, the individual begins to sense a feeling of his or her own identity, a feeling that one is unique human being and prepares himself or herself to fit into some meaningful role in society. So the person becomes aware of individual inherent characteristics such as likes and dislikes, goals of the future, and the strengths and weaknesses and purpose to control one's own destiny. So according to Erikson, this is a time in life when one wishes to define what one is at the present and what one wants to be in the future. And here the most important concept is identity crisis. Erikson viewed that failure to establish a sense of identity can lead to role confusion and identity crisis. So it involves confusion about one's social role and one's sense of self or identity. So far we have discussed about the various versions of psychodynamic theories. Now all these theories found to be very prominent and influential theories of personality development, but these approaches also face criticisms. So the major criticisms are such as these theories are unscientific in the analysis of human behavior because they are based on case studies and therefore they are subjective. The second criticism is they use small samples for generalizations. The third is the concepts are not properly defined and it is very difficult to prove them by empirical research or scientific testing. Now the another criticism is Freud's theory was criticized because he overlooked female experiences and perspectives, and assumptions of his theory are male dominated. Now our next approach for understanding the personality or human behavior is behavioral approach. So behavioral approach emphasizes the observation and measurement of behavior. It does not give importance to the internal dynamics of behavior because mental processes can't be observed by others, and they don't focus on the structure of personality. Rather, they are concerned with behavior, how it is learned, how it changes, and so on. So they focus on learning of stimulus-response connections and their reinforcement. They view personality as significantly shaped by the reinforcements and consequences outside the organism. Now they see the development simply as a change in response characteristics, that is, a person learns new behaviors in response to new environments and stimuli. So the structural unit of personality is response. Now each response is emitted to satisfy a need. So we can take an example. Children who do not eat vegetables learn to eat them gradually because if they are reinforced by their parents, and later on they develop the taste of vegetables because of conditioning. So observational learning theory emphasizes that aspects of behavior and personality takes place through observing the behavior of others, and it gives emphasis on social learning based on imitation. Also, the basic tendency that organizes behavior is the reduction of biological or social needs that motivate behavior, and this is achieved through response or behaviors that are reinforced. So based on behavioral approach, the theories of classical conditioning, instrumental conditioning, and observational learning follows the learning principles that involve the use of stimuli, responses, and reinforcement in different ways. Now moving on to the cultural approach. This approach explains the personality in terms of individual ecology and cultural environment. Individual personality is determined by group economic maintenance system. So personality is very much influenced by climatic conditions, availability of food, availability of employment, and nature of terrain, etc. So the economic maintenance system determines people's economic activities, settlement patterns, social structures, and division of labor and other features like child rearing practices. So all these elements constitute a child's overall learning environment. So people's skills, abilities, behavioral styles, and value priorities are viewed as strongly linked to these features. Rituals, ceremonies, religious practices, arts, games, and play, and other recreational activities determine person's personality, and people develop different personality or behavioral qualities in the process of adapting to the ecological and cultural features of groups life. So let us understand this approach with the help of example. So we have taken two groups belonging to two different types of cultures. One is the Bihar society of Jharkhand. Most of the people live a nomadic life. Children of this society are allowed from an early age to move into the forest and learn hunting and gathering skills independently. So therefore, children from this society get freedom, autonomy and achievement oriented from childhood. So the other group is agricultural societies. Now children are socialized to be obedient to elders, nurturing to youngsters and responsible to their duties. So therefore, these personality characteristics become dominant in their personality. So because of different economic conditions and cultural demands, children of both the societies develop and display different personality patterns. Now moving on to the next important approach, that is humanistic approach. So this approach considered Freud's theory or psychoanalysis too pessimistic and negative, and humanistic approach developed as a reaction against both psychoanalysis and behaviorism. So humanistic theorists dislike the negative features of both the approaches and they emphasize the positive and good aspects of human behavior. So humanistic psychologists wanted a psychology that focused instead on the healthy, the rational and the conscious and integrated self. So they focus upon the individual subjective perceptions of self, the world and the self within the world. This approach focuses on the personal worth of the individual, the creative, active nature of human beings. So it is optimistic and focuses on the positive nature of human beings. Two of the most influential humanistic theorists are Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow. So firstly, we will discuss about the main assumptions of Carl Rogers' personality theory. Rogers suggested that there is one major component of personality, that is self, and his theory is structured around the concept of self. According to his theory, people constantly involve themselves in the process of actualizing their true self, and self includes both one's strengths and weaknesses and both accuracies and inaccuracies. Rogers suggests that one most important component of the self is the ideal self, the self or self-image one would like to have or the person we would like to be. So the real self is the true self, who we actually are, and the ideal self is that the self-image one would like to have. Rogers suggests if there is a gap between the real self and the ideal self, this gap or incongruence or dissimilarity creates unhappiness and dissatisfaction in one's personality. And if there is congruency between the real self and ideal self, the healthier and happier will be the person. So another most important concept is fully functioning person. In Rogers' theory, he claimed that fully functioning person would have the aim to fulfill his or her potential, capabilities, talents to the possible fullest and highest levels. So they have the innate tendency to achieve their fullest potential. They continuously work for becoming self-actualized person. Now, you can understand the congruency between the real self and ideal self with the help of this picture. Now, another assumption of Rogers is that human behavior is goal-directed and worthwhile. He considered self-actualization as the basic motivation of human behavior, and people are basically good and motivated to develop their potential, to strive to become more than they were. Personality development is continuous process according to Rogers, and it involves learning to evaluate oneself and mastering the process of self-actualization. So Rogers have also emphasized the role of social situations in the development of self-concept. When social conditions are positive, the self-concept and self-esteem are high, whereas when social conditions are negative, the self-concept and self-esteem are low. So people with high self-concept and self-esteem are generally flexible and open to new experiences, and therefore they can enhance their potentials and can become self-actualized person. Now Rogers have also talked about the unconditional positive regard, which means that the person is regarded positively, unconditionally, that is, the person is accepted and respected without having any conditions. So it helps in healthy personality. Parents who care for their children, regardless of what the children are saying or doing, they are providing unconscious positive regard to their children. Now, Rogers has used this concept in his client-centered therapy while dealing with the clients or patients. Now, in this picture, you can understand the concept of self-actualization very well. Now, moving on to the another important humanistic theorist who was Abraham Maslow. Now, Abraham Maslow proposed the need theory of motivation, and in class 11th, you have already read about Maslow's need theory, in which he emphasized on the most important level, self-actualization. After the fulfillment of physiological and safety needs and other needs, person reached to the highest level of self-actualization. So, self-actualization is a state in which people have reached their own fullest potential. Maslow had a very optimistic view and positive view of man, who has potentialities for love, joy, and he can do creative work. So, human beings are considered free to shape their lives and to self-actualize. All needs like physiological, safety needs, belongingness needs are found in all organisms. But the real journey of human life begins with the process of fulfillment of self-esteem and self-actualization needs. So, humanistic theorists define self-actualized persons as healthy persons who are open to new experiences, they are creative, live in the moments of life, and they are humorous. So, here are some characteristics of healthy personality according to humanistic theorists. So, with this we have finished all the approaches of personality, and here are some sample questions which you can practice and can give answers in the comment box. The answers of these questions will be provided in the next video class. So, thank you very much. Stay home, stay safe, and keep learning.